You remember the exact sound of a dial-up modem connecting to the internet for the first time. But you also remember a childhood with no internet at all. You remember passing handwritten notes in class. And you remember creating your first MySpace page. You exist in two worlds simultaneously. And most of the time, you felt like you don't fully belong to either one. If that lands somewhere deep in your chest, stay with me, because this video is specifically for you. Picture this. It's 1994, you're 13 years old, Saturday morning. Your mom tells you your friends called while you were out. You have no idea when. You have no idea which friend. You have no idea what they wanted. So you do what every kid did back then. You get on your bike, ride over to their house and knock on the door. Maybe they're home, maybe they're not. You just figure it out. Now fast forward 10 years, you're in your mid-20s, you have a phone in your pocket, you have email, you have Friendster, then MySpace, then Facebook. The world went from knocking on doors to having 17 ways to reach someone almost overnight. And somehow, without any manual, without any training, you just adapted. You figured it out, like you always have. That is not a small thing. Most people don't realize what that kind of adaptation actually does to a person, what it costs, what it builds, and what it quietly leaves behind. Here's what nobody ever tells you about your generation. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, the world has spent decades trying to squeeze you into categories that never quite fit. Too young to be a true Gen Xer, too old to be a millennial. And every time someone tries to place you into one of those boxes, something inside you resists. Because you know, even if you can't articulate it exactly, that your experience was different. Researchers started calling this group Xennials around 2014. Some sociologists call it a microgeneration because the window is that specific. And the reason it deserves its own name is not just about birth years on a chart. It's about what happened during those specific years, what you lived through, what that did to your brain, your sense of self, your relationship with the world. And I want to be honest with you about something before we go any further. This is not a video about how your generation is special or superior. It's a video about something much more interesting than that. It's about how you were shaped by a collision of two entirely different worlds, and how carrying both of those worlds inside you is something most people are only beginning to understand. Think about your childhood for a moment. Really think about it. Boredom was a real experience back then, not the kind of boredom where you pick up your phone after 30 seconds. Actual boredom. Sitting on the floor of your bedroom on a Tuesday afternoon with nothing to do and nowhere to be and no screen to escape into. You had to sit with that feeling. You had to invent something, build something, imagine something, wander outside and find something. And here's the psychological truth about that kind of boredom. It was actually building something in you. Researchers who study child development have found that unstructured time, real time with nothing planned and no stimulation provided, is deeply connected to creative thinking, emotional regulation, and the capacity to tolerate discomfort. Your brain learned how to be still, how to wait, how to manufacture meaning out of nothing. That's a skill, a rare one, and most of the world is losing it. You also grew up learning something else that almost nobody talks about anymore. You learned how to trust people without being able to verify them constantly. When you made plans with your friends, you couldn't text to confirm the morning of, you couldn't send a quick message saying you were running 5 minutes late, you just showed up, and you trusted that they would too. That kind of social commitment required something deeper than logistics. It required faith in people, a willingness to show up without a safety net. And when it worked, when you all actually made it to the same place at the same time without any of the technology we rely on now, there was something in that. A kind of quiet confidence in human connection that doesn't get built the same way anymore, but then something shifted, and it shifted fast. You were somewhere in your late teens or early 20s when the digital world arrived. And here's what makes that timing so psychologically significant. There's a region of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for things like decision-making, adapting to new situations, and learning complex skills. And research has shown that this region doesn't fully mature until around the age of 25, which means it's still highly flexible, still deeply shaped by experience, well into your early adult years. For most generations, that window of brain plasticity is filled with one kind of world, one set of rules, one technological reality. But for Xennials, that window was split directly in half. The first part of it was analog. The second part was digital. And your brain was still in its most adaptable state for both. This is why you don't freeze up around new technology the way some older generations do. But it's also why you don't take it for granted the way younger generations often do. You have something genuinely rare. A kind of fluency in both languages. The language of presence, patience, and physical connection. And the language of networks, information, and digital speed. Psychologists sometimes call this cognitive flexibility. The ability to hold two different frameworks in your mind and move between them without losing your footing. You were built for it, not by choice, by timing. Now here's the part of this story that almost never gets told. Right around the time you were supposed to be settling in, building your career, maybe starting a family, finding your financial footing, the world collapsed. 2008, the financial crisis. And a lot of you were right in the middle of it. Not children who were shielded from it. Not established adults with savings and stability to cushion the fall. You were young professionals. New adults, people who had done everything right, and still watched the ground shift beneath them. I want you to sit with that for a second. Research on economic hardship during early adulthood is actually quite clear about what it does to people long term. When you experience financial instability during the years when you're supposed to be building your sense of security in the world, it doesn't just affect your bank account. It affects how you think about risk, how you think about trust, how you carry yourself into every financial decision that comes after. Even when things get better, and for many of you they did, the imprint of that uncertainty doesn't simply disappear. It lives underneath the surface. That quiet voice that asks, what if it all falls apart again? Even in moments when everything is fine. So you have this extraordinary capacity for adaptation, and underneath it, this deep, almost invisible current of financial anxiety. And most people around you have no idea both of those things exist in the same person. That combination is not a contradiction. It makes complete sense when you understand what you actually lived through. Here's something I want you to think about. Something that might feel a little uncomfortable. You are one of the last generations to have an undocumented youth. Your embarrassing moments from middle school don't exist on the internet. That terrible haircut in 7th grade. That relationship that ended badly. That night in college that you'd rather forget. None of it was photographed and uploaded and permanently attached to your identity. It lived in the imperfect memories of the people who were there. And memories are merciful in a way that documentation simply isn't. Human memory is designed to be fluid. Your brain is actually built to soften certain experiences over time, to reshape narratives, to let things fade when they no longer serve you. That's not a flaw. That's one of the most protective features of the human mind. But when everything is permanently recorded and searchable and accessible, that natural process gets interrupted. People become trapped by earlier versions of themselves in ways that previous generations never were. You escape that. Mostly. And there's something about that freedom that's worth recognizing. You got to grow up in the mess and privacy of being young. You got to make your mistakes in rooms that eventually emptied. You got to become someone different without the weight of photographic evidence following you everywhere. That is a kind of psychological freedom that is becoming increasingly rare. And most people who have it don't even realize it, But here's the twist. The part that makes the Xennial experience genuinely complex. You can see what's been lost, and that's not something everyone can do. Younger generations who grew up entirely in the digital world don't have a reference point for what existed before it. They've never known what it means to be truly unreachable. To sit in a waiting room with nothing but your own thoughts for company. To have a conversation that vanished into thin air because no one was recording it. They don't experience that as a loss because they never had it to lose. And older generations, the ones who spent most of their lives in the analog world, sometimes struggle to fully embrace what technology has genuinely given us. The access, the connection, the ability to find your people no matter where you are in the world. But you can see both sides from the inside. You know what presence felt like before there was always something else competing for your attention. You remember what patience built in you, what real waiting taught you, but you also genuinely appreciate what came after. You're not nostalgic in a bitter way. You're nostalgic in a clear-eyed way. You know what was gained and you know what was given up. And holding both of those truths at the same time without collapsing into one extreme or the other is actually one of the most sophisticated psychological positions a person can occupy. Most people don't know you carry that. Most people don't even ask. And that might be the loneliest part of all of this. You've spent a lot of your life feeling slightly out of place. Too digital for some conversations and too old school for others. The Gen X people who are 5 years older than you have a different kind of skepticism. The millennials 5 years younger than you have a different kind of comfort with technology. And you're standing in the middle, understanding both groups, fully belonging to neither. That feeling is not in your head. It's not you being dramatic or difficult. It is an accurate reflection of what your generation's experience actually was. The research on microgeneration identity consistently shows that people who grew up in these transitional periods, in the space between two dominant cultural paradigms, often feel a persistent sense of not quite belonging anywhere. And they often interpret that feeling as a personal failing rather than what it actually is, a structural reality of the specific moment in history they were born into. You are not too much for one world and too little for another. You are someone who learned to carry both. That's not a weakness. That's an unusual kind of strength that most people are still trying to develop from scratch. Here's what I want to leave you with. The world is changing faster than any generation before yours has ever experienced. The pace of transformation, technological, cultural, economic, is accelerating in ways that make nearly everyone feel disoriented and out of place. And what's being asked of people right now is exactly the skill you spent your entire life developing without realizing it was a skill. How do you adapt to a world that won't hold still? How do you stay connected to yourself when the environment keeps shifting? How do you hold on to what matters from the past without being left behind by the present? You learn that in real time, in your actual life, during the years when it mattered most, not because someone taught you, not because you had a choice, but because you grew up in the crack between two worlds. And rather than falling through it, you built a bridge. There's an entire generation of people walking around right now who feel caught between things. Between who they were and who they're becoming. Between the world they understood and the world they're being asked to navigate. And they're looking for a way through. You've already found it. You've already lived it. You adapted without losing yourself. And maybe, quietly. That's the most important thing any of us ever learns to do.